Allez, bonjour. Magazine Bemoyan Edition cause. The Conning you don't jabba. Shaw game you don't them. The BC Nishnabe. Good morning, everybody. My name is Campeau, also known as DJ Indian, formerly of a tribe called Red. I want to thank you so much for inviting me here for this talk. I'm so excited. Creativity and what it means. I've been on a very heavy journey on language and culture reclamation, and I'm really excited to share with everybody here. I feel bad because it's a lot of information, and for me it was foundation shattering, so I'm going to apologize in advance on how much information you're getting right now. So being creative, as we understand it, this is a petroglyph over in Peterborough, at the Peterborough petroglyphs, and some people think that this is Gizem Nado, which is our idea of God. Gizem Nado means the benevolent mystery. We don't know what it is, but it gives to us in a beautiful way. And Gizem Nado, the creator, created all of us, created everything in a dream. Gizem Nado dreamt us, and it started from the tiniest seed, and it shook, and it grew, and it sounded like a shaker. In our stories it says it sounded like a shaker. And it grew into the galaxies and the planets and the mountains and the lakes and you and me. And the Creator Gizem Nado thought us into existence. And the only way that we can give thanks back to the Creator for our creation is to create like Gizem Nado. That's the only way that we can give anything back for our own creation, is to be creative and do things like this. Right? That's why I'm so excited to be here. I just learned this. This is exciting stuff. So I'm known as a creative person, as I was in a group called A Tribe Called Red, where we won a few Junos. I toured the world. It was a lot of fun while it lasted. And what I realized, though, was that art, as what's so important about art and being creative, is that art can permeate a lot of the barriers that we have within society. It permeates race, it permeates class, it permeates gender. So it's a really effective tool in getting into places that you're not usually allowed. And you can put in ideas, and you can put in whatever you want to say to help change whatever you think is wrong. So creativity in art is extremely important, and using your platform as a way to help end a lot of the oppression. Right, in A Tribe Called Red, all of a sudden I had thousands of followers, and I was able to take on things that I saw unjust in Ottawa. Like the Redskins team. Now that we had thousands of followers on Twitter, I had a voice, and I had a soapbox. I was able to confront this team that has been around for decades. Right, it's a powerful tool to be able to stand and permeate these places because you made art. So we're here to talk about roots. And roots, as I understand it, it's the part of the plant that you don't see. It's what came before. Right? You see me here, but there was something that ran deeper. My ancestors, my connection to the land. I have roots to this place that a lot of people don't have. How many people live in Ottawa right now? Okay, you're from Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. Keep your hand up if you know what any of those words mean or what languages they're in. Right? We have a connection. We're surrounded and immersed in Indigenous language and culture, but we don't recognize it. Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, Mississauga, Oshawa, Winnipeg, Manitoba, Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Iqaluit, Nunavut. Those are all Indigenous words. Quebec is an Indigenous word. It's an Anishinaabe word. Did anybody know that? Does anybody know what Quebec means? Right? How's that connection? Do you know what Quebec means? Okay. It means the cutoff. It's talking about the narrows of a river. That's what Quebec means. But so roots to me is the part that came before you. What are you connected to in a way that came before you? Right? Where do you get your nutrition? Where do you get why you exist? Your roots are what were there before you. So discovering my roots, that's my mom who's sitting up front here. Discovering my roots was a major shift in my understanding of who I am and what I am. And my connection to language came in a really awkward way. We're going to start with like why I don't know my language. And it starts with me, and then it goes my mom, who doesn't know her language, but then my grandparents till infinity, right? They knew their language forever, so it just started with my mom. The reason being that building behind her there, that's an old school. And that was a school that all the kids went to in my reserve. And my uncles went to that school, and then the town, Sturgeon Falls, got a new Catholic school, and they needed funding for that school. So how do you get funding? You need students. So they shut down our school in our reserve to get the students to come to this Catholic school, where my uncles were beat for speaking the language, right? They got hit whenever they spoke the language. So the nuns went home to my grandma's house and told my grandma, like, please don't teach the rest of your kids the language because they'll get hit at school. They're gonna have a hard time at school. So out of love for my mom, my grandma didn't teach my mom the language, so I don't know my language. So here I am scrambling. I drive 8 hours a week to Nipissing, to North Bay, every Wednesday for a 2-hour class for that connection. Because that's the only way I can hear it. That's the only way, that's the tuition. That's what it costs. If there was a school that had that dialect, I would pay it. But it doesn't. I have to do this drive to reclaim this. Sorry, I get emotional. So the big moment in my reclamation, I guess, of myself is I got a name. I got given a name by my aunt. My name is Megeze Beboyad. Megeze means bald eagle. Gnu is a golden eagle, but Megeze is a bald eagle. And Beboyad means wandering around, like without direction. Like it's like a wandering eagle. And I got this name, and now in that moment, I got something that I needed to live up to. I had a purpose. I had something that I needed to do, right? I needed to figure this out. And through my learnings, I'm still trying to figure it out. But what I got so far is the idea that the eagle carries the prayers of the people to Guillaume Nadeau. It's the highest flying bird, so it's what's able to connect to Guillaume Nadeau to bring the prayers to the Creator. And I guess I'm supposed to wander around and collect the prayers or collect something of the people and share it in some way. I'm some sort of connection. And that's as far as I got with my name so far. That's where I'm at. But it was in that moment, something sparked in me. I don't know how to explain it or what it was, but I remember like I needed to start learning. I needed language. I got given this name, and it was like, okay, it's go time. And I wanted language. That was a big thing. And my mom had given me a packet which had language lessons in the back. And on the front, it had an assessment from 1902 from a Dr. R.B. Orr, who was an anthropologist in 1902. And if you don't know a lot about 18th century anthropology, it's pretty racist. They still consider eugenics a recognized science and whatnot. So he was describing the Nipissing people in ways that were pretty racist, right? He was describing us as Rousseau's ideal man, which is kind of calling us monkeys, basically, without any sort of whatever. But there was one thing that this R.B. Orr was referencing that really, really shook me to the core, and it was a Jesuit's quote who described the Nipissing as being absolutely free and independent. This is from a Jesuit in the 1600s, right? And he said that if the Nipissing man isn't absolutely free and independent, then there is no absolute freedom and independence on earth. And that was the first time I was like, oh, that was taken from me through colonization, right? I don't feel absolutely free right now. I can't do whatever I want. And I started understanding what that meant. Like, you were completely autonomous to make any decision that you wanted. Some decisions were good and worked out for you, some of them were bad, but you didn't have people tell you what to do, which is outside of how we know. We have jobs, we have landlords, we have people telling us where the dog can poop. We have so many people telling us what to do, and it was just like, oh, absolute freedom. What does that even look like? And then a buddy of mine who's actually in the room, he got accepted into university, and he's like, hey, I got access to a library. Why don't we look up the Jesuit diaries? So we spent a whole day, a big project, looking up the Jesuit diaries, and anytime that Nipissing was mentioned. And it was Like discovering my own Wakanda, right? Seeing my people untouched by colonization and thriving with our own ideologies. They would describe how we used to boil water before we had metal pots, right? If anybody wants to know, ask after. They describe like weird situations where the Anishinaabe people wouldn't say their own name in vain, but they would say like each other's names, but they wouldn't say it out loud. And I was like, what is all this? Then I came across one part where it said that the Nipissing were such powerful sorcerers that were able to resurrect the dead. I was like, that's what I want back. Give me that knowledge back, right? Like there was a big disconnect now, and I wanted to know what it was. So the Jesuit Diaries was a big motivator in learning language, and I figured like a good way to learn this language was to use something that I could use every day. So I learned the days of the week, and bear with me, we'll go through them. They look really hard and really long, but I'll explain them all. And it helped. This was one of those things that shattered a lot of my understanding. So Monday is Shkinoki Gijget. Shka means first, new, or beginning. Noki means work. Gijget means day. So each of those, first work day, Monday, Shkinoki Gijget. But each of those syllables break down to have an even deeper explanation. So shka, first, new, or beginning. No means to develop or grow in a good way. Ki means the land, aki. Gijgat, our word for sky is gijik. Gizis is the sun. And like beboyat, gijgat means the moving sky. That's our word for day. So, Shkinoki Gijgat means Monday. Shkinoki Gijgat means first work day. Shkinoki Gijgat means first developing the land in a good way while the sky moves. Right? So we can go as micro or as macro as we want with these words. Tuesday is Nij Gijget. Nij is our number 2. So it's just second day. Nij Gijget. Wednesday, Abtose. Abta means half. Abtose means halfway. Wednesday. So before I go to Thursday, I gotta point something out. There's an archaeologist who does a dig on Nipissing every year with youth, and he told me there's archaeological proof of our people living on Lake Nipissing for 13,000 years. Didn't sink in how long that was until he said that's 11,000 years longer than Jesus. Right? So that's how long we've been living on this lake. So that's important to go on here, because Thursday, Shpingonwan. Shpingonwan means consecration. I'll break it down to Shpa means up. Shping means the place up there. If you hear ing, ang, ong, any of those ng suffixes, it means the place of. So think of all the communities, like Anishinaabe communities, in Ontario. Nipissing, Wakwemacong, Wasaksing, Saugeen, that means the place of. That ending is saying it's the place of something. So Shpa is up. Shping is the place up there, which means heaven. It's our word for heaven. Shpingonwan is to make heavenly, or consecration. Friday. Jibe togo yijget. So Jibe is a ghost of a person, but it also means like the sacredness of a person and the holiness of a person. Man, Ndo is like a spirit, but Jibe is like a ghost of a human specifically. Tig means a wood or tree. And tig is a tree, tig is like a piece of wood. Et tigo is a wooden X or a wooden cross. Gijget day. So Jibe tigo Gijget, holy wooden cross day. Okay. Saturday, Mani Gijget. Mani is how we say Mary. There's no N's in Anishinaabe, so all of our N's get turned into, all of our R's get turned into N's. There's no R's in our language, so all the R's get turned into N's. So Manawaki is Mary's land. So Mani Gijget is Mary's day. I see a lot of people's gears starting. Sunday, Name Gijget. Name means to pray. Gijget means day. So Sunday's prayer day. So obviously they're super Christian, right? And I asked my auntie what the names of the days were pre-contact, because this is obviously post-contact. She said, we didn't have the 7-day cycle. We had a 28-day cycle, which was the moon cycles. And each day would have been, the name of it would have been sunny day, or snowy day, or rainy day, because each day was to be respected as its own living being because it lives its full life cycle. And it's weird that we live in a society where it'll be like, this Wednesday is great compared to last Wednesday, when they're incomparable as living beings. Then you realize we live in the 7-day cycle named after Norse gods to control our time and how we contribute to capitalism. And that's it. There's no other reason why we live by the 7-day cycle. When you go on vacation, you stop caring what day it is a day into your vacation because you're not going to work. Right? I learned the days of the week in my language, and it shattered my understanding of how time was kept, to the point where something tied to my identity, like my date of birth, is only reinforced in white Christian supremacy. Right? It's heavy. Coming to this realization is heavy. And there's other things in this language, like our pronouns. Gendered pronouns or preferred gender pronouns are a big discussion these days, where we didn't have them. There's me, geen, you, we, they, them. That's it. No Mr., Mrs., no captain, doctor. It was the autonomy of the being. So we didn't have these gender binaries, but we did have a binary, which was between animate and inanimate. Sit on that for a second. So we had, that was the difference in how you address the being, the anonymity of the being. Our words are super fluid too. One of the best teachings I got on the language is that there's no explanation, or there's no definitions, only explanations. So, for example, a house cat is gosh gans. That's how you say a house cat. Ain's almost that suffix means small. Same as like tito in Spanish. But gosh gans means to be selfish. So gosh gans is a little selfish thing. Okay? Gosh cat means to scratch. So gosh cans is a little scratchy thing. Right? Both of them are apt descriptions, but neither define the being. Right? So all of our words do this. They explain it. They don't define it, which is a very, very important way of thinking. We have words like ishkadeh. Ishkadeh. I'm going to try, I'll show you some things, and then we'll see if you can tell me what it means. So the breakdown for it, if you remember before, ish means first, new, or beginning. And odeh, it means a heart or a center of a being. That's our word for fire. Ishkadeh. Now it gives an explanation of what that element is in a way that word fire just doesn't. Right? In the middle of Takmakwe, in the middle of Mother Earth, there's a fire. In the middle of the sun, there's a fire. We knew this, we understood this in our language. There's a little spark of fire, the first fire, or new heart. Right? Ishkadeh. Odemin. Let me see. So min means berry or seed. So odemin is a heart berry or heart seed. And that's our word for strawberry. So we didn't have straw, right? They call them strawberries now because colonists used strawberry or straw around it so it couldn't grow the way it was supposed to, but it looks like a heart, so we call it the heartberry. Which, if you didn't see it before, and I was like, hey, go down there and find the heartberry, describe it as that, you would know what I was talking about. So this is a big word. I'm gonna break it down, and I want you to figure out the English translation. Bomadzuin. So bim, it means to travel through space and time. Bim comes up often. Bomose means to walk. Bomipto means to run. Bomagde means to swim. Bomis is to fly. So bim is to travel through space and time. Odd is the natural character of a being. Okay, if you're funny, just naturally funny, that's your character. You were born that way, that's just how you are. Iza is the state of a being, and win is the power coming from within that being. So, Bomantuin is traveling through space and time in the state of your natural character with the power coming from within you. So our word for life. Mino Bomantuin, the good life. That's what we're going after. We're trying to live, we're trying to travel through space and time in the best way in our character. This is how powerful this language is. So this is a big word these days, reconciliation. I have a personal definition. There's a lot of people that have a lot of different ideas of what this means. But the actual definition in the English language is repairing a sullied relationship between two parties. What did Indigenous people do that we need to repair? We didn't do anything. Reconciliation isn't for Indigenous people, it's for non-Indigenous people to figure out how to fix this relationship. And I'll give you a hint on how to do that. For me, it's give it back. Give back what was taken. Because a lot of time, effort, and resources went into me not knowing my language. Policies had to be made. Teachers had to be hired. Schools had to be made. A lot of time and effort went into me not knowing this language and disconnecting me from my culture. Put in as much time and effort and resources into giving it back. Right? Make it easier than 8 hours a week for me to go drive for a 2-hour class. Make my kids as proud of their culture as you made my grandparents ashamed. That's what reconciliation looks like to me. And that's what I think we need to work towards. And to start doing that, we need to start learning language. Learn the language of where you're from. Right? My language explains the Great Lakes in a depth that no other language does. If you want to know how things work in Africa, learn the languages there. If you want to know how things work in Australia, learn the languages there. But here, my language works. Could you imagine if we found an elder who spoke ancient Aramaic? The knowledge that we want from that. We have that. They meet on Wednesdays in a church basement. I'm serious. Like, nobody really recognizes the power that we have in this Indigenous language because people can't make money off of it. Right? It connects us to the land where we can just go be happy. We can live in the bush and be happy. Our language explains how everything works. So you have to remove that language. Right? That way, if you remove the language, you can take the person out of the forest and then develop the resources within that forest. So this was all planned, but we need to give it back. Learn the languages. That's super important. And I just want to say thank you all for listening. Miigwech Pasinda Sorry if I'm getting emotional. But yeah, thank you all for listening.
When you were explaining Sunday, you said pre-contact and post-contact. Can you explain that further, please?
Yeah, so there was a time where colonial structures from Europe came to North America, and for the first time, these two people met. And the first people to meet with the Nipissing people were a group of Jesuits named, one of them was named Jean Nicolet. And yeah, just from that moment, from when we found out that Europeans existed to now, that's post-contact, right? We're making contact with the colonial forces. So that's what I was describing, pre and post-contact.
Anin, bonjour.
Bonjour.
Thank you so much. I was unclear if I missed it, but what was the university and the library where you were doing your research?
It was Carleton U, I believe.
Yes.
It was, definitely. I think it was. It was at Carleton U.
This is a kind of pre-contact, post-contact question again. The word for a strawberry, herberry, do you know if that's origin was pre-contact?
Yeah, Damon was pre-contact, I know that. And when I bring up that animate versus inanimate, it feels really, really arbitrary, and I haven't found a pattern yet. So for example, like a raspberry is mishkomin. Mishko is red, min is berry, so it's like the red berry. But the plural for mishkomin is mishkominak, and the plural for strawberries is odeminan, which means strawberries are inanimate and raspberries are animate. I don't know why. I haven't gotten that teaching. I haven't gotten that in depth. But it gave me, like, now I want to know. You know what I mean? I need to figure it out. Because there's a lot of explanations with that animate versus inanimate. And some of it, like, makes sense, and some of it feels really arbitrary. But I know it isn't. Like, I know our ancestors were very, very specific in a lot of their explanations. So, yeah.
I just think it's interesting that if it's based on the shape of it, that even pre-contact, the shape of our is consistent with what it is now.
Well, it looks more like, if you think of a strawberry, it looks more like an actual, like,
Right.
heart, right?
Hey Ian, first of all, thank you so much for pointing us in this direction of doing this work for ourselves. I want to say that I've just started my journey of doing language liberation work. My parents are immigrants, and I first learned to speak Portuguese and then have lost some of it. And also through my personal journey and in helping others, what I've realized is that most of us, whether or not there was a language that was there from our parents or from generations back, are actually just suppressing all of the pain and reminders that loss has that lives within our bodies, and that doing that work is really about like a deeper healing process, and that in fact many of us don't want to look at the struggles of Indigenous folks because we're so tightly suppressing things that happened to us generations back. So my question to you is, at what point in our journey of doing this work do we come together, and what could that look like in supporting Indigenous liberation?
Learn as much as you can. Learn our way of life. It was completely different, and like we had a different hierarchy of beings. Okay, we weren't dominant of anything. We were the custodians of everything. The hierarchy of beings, as we understood it, the most supreme beings is what's known as the physical realm, but it's less abstract than that. It's beings that don't need help; they just exist. So it's like the sun, the moon, the earth, the stars, the directions, the days. Like those are beings, as we understood, as being superior because they don't need help; they just exist. After those beings comes the plant beings. So the plants only need the physical realm to exist. You only need sun, earth, water. That's it, and they're perfect. Okay, they're perfect beings. They grow when they can and they don't when they can't. That's why they make us like the best teachers for humans. So that's why we pay so much respect to plants, because they're way, way more advanced than we are. After the plants come the animal beings. So animals, Guillaume Nadeau gave them specific things that they were supposed to do, right? They got claws and wings and fins. They got given a direction on how they're supposed to live their life. After them comes us, right? Human beings. We were clumsy and trying to like go, and we need animals, plants in the physical realm, and none of them need us in any shape, way, or form. So when you approach these beings, when you need something, which is literally everything, you're supposed to approach them the same way you approach somebody that you want something from, but they don't need anything from you. So hat in hand, explanations, gifts, right? We brought tobacco, we verbally explained why we needed this medicine in a very humble way. And if there was any sort of pullback in trying to take this medicine, we didn't take it. The plants said no. We gave autonomy to the plants, right? Complete consent to the plants, because domination was outside of our understanding of what it means to be a human being. So when you come down to the idea of sexual violence, right, that's a colonial concept, because sex, hands down, is the most important medicine we have as human beings. Without it, you don't have other human beings, right? So if we gave plants the autonomy to ask for their medicine, we obviously got the consent from other human beings. That's how far away we are in cultures, right? The idea of dominance and control is outside of how we knew how to be. Where Canada is called the Dominion of Canada. It's based on dominance and control, right? That's not how we understood how to be, and that's why we got dominated so heavily by one way, because it was outside of how we understood.
Hi. Thank you so much for opening yourself up so much this morning. That was incredible. Considering what I've heard from before, like the music that you used to be involved in, have you ever considered or done talks where you integrate either the music that you've already created or new, maybe more I guess, traditional, I don't want to say traditional style, Indigenous music that you would incorporate into talks with that? Because I just feel like the words you had alone were so powerful that if it was in like a musical setting with the background that you have you ever considered doing that?
What I'm trying to do now, since leaving A Tribe Called Red, I'm trying to do the same thing I did with A Tribe Called Red, but with all media, right? I'm starting a fashion clothing with a friend here, and we're putting petroglyphs on it, because people need to see that, right? It's important. So this is a way for you to see like both Indigenous culture, but in a new way. So the same way with music, like mashing up, all we did with The Tribe Called Red was mash up dance music with dance music, right? So I'm also working on writing. I'm writing a lot. I'm writing a YA novel. I'm writing children's novels. I'm doing all these things so that, again, I'm taking storytelling and kind of mashing them up, right? We tell our stories different. We have different ways of explaining. And it gets way deeper, guys. Like, this is a whole other aside. But when you hear these like quote unquote Indian legends that you've heard that are like loose moral tales that you've been hearing your whole life and you don't really know what they're about, if you know the language, there's data and history hidden in that that's so important. And it's like, it's heavy. It's so heavy. So if you like learn the language and start hearing these stories again, we're like, Nana Bush was trying to cross a river with Sister Wolf, and Sister Wolf fell in and got eaten by the water panther. It's like, I need to hear that in language, because there's stories in that, right? Our creative story, the one that I told about this morning, where Guillaume Nadeau thought us into existence was from the tiniest seed. That's talking about the Big Bang, right? We talked about that, and in that story, I know what the Big Bang sounded like. It sounded like a shaker. Shh. That's what creation sounded like. That's in our stories. They're all there. We have stories about sky people coming down in a shell, and how the last time he came, he was younger, and like now there's a man that's an old man, and you have to explain that time works different when you live behind the moon. That's the Einstein's theory of relativity, that time works different relative to where you are. Those are in our stories. We've been observing all of this scientifically for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, where the colonial method of scientific observation is a few hundred years old. Right? So these if you know the language, you got a key to all these stories that have like this heavy scientific and historical data. Again, that was a big aside, I'm sorry.
Thank you so much for sharing. And actually, on the red bottle. So I'm a Red River Métis, and that's also kind of in earlier steps than you are, trying to learn my own language, which the reason it's so intense for me is actually because my culture is actually a mixture of colonialism and Plains Cree people. So, merci for sharing. It means a lot to me. And unfortunately, I'm terribly sorry, I don't have a question, but I did want to challenge everybody here to learn how hard it is to learn your language. At the National Art Gallery right now, there's Alvaraquane, which is about Indigenous people around the world. And there's a number of pieces in there that's actually that speaks about language and Indigenous language. Here in Canada, and Joy Argent has a piece in the public space where in Plains Cree she's written some text. And I'd like to challenge you all to go to the National Art Gallery and look at that piece that is in the public space, so you don't even need to pay, and look at it and try to learn what it says. And like you were saying, there's so many ways of interpreting what it says, because the language has a story, like the words have a story, and then there's a few more pieces within the gallery, so if you do get the chance to go, you'll have the opportunity of seeing all of that. Language.
Something that a lot of people don't realize, like the Métis culture. So my people were contacted in 1617, right? And then Confederation happened in 1867. So that's 250 years of relationships and getting along. And Canada's only 150 years old, right? So we have like an extra 100 years outside of this like colonial oppression, where like we got along with the French and traded, and that's where the Métis came from. It was 300 years of developing this culture through trade and understanding. And because they kind of got caught in the middle, a lot of their values and whatnot, the culture that had been growing for hundreds of years got pushed aside because of colonial law, right, which is made up. Right, a lot of white supremacy is legislated, right? people of color of African descent didn't enact and enforce slavery laws of themselves. The Indian Removal Act, the Japanese internment camps, the Chinese head tax. Right? And if you want to get more up to date and closer to home, I still live under the Indian Act. Right? So this is legislation, white supremacist legislation. And people get really scared when I bring up white supremacy, thinking I'm only talking about the KKK and Nazis. Well, white supremacy doesn't only mean hate. White supremacy means feelings of superiority. So if you think that your language, way of life, and religion is better than mine, that makes you a white supremacist. You don't have to hate me. You just have to think you're better than me. That's something that a lot of people need to sit on and really, really digest what it means to be a white supremacist.
Thank you so much, Ian. This is so powerful. My question is, as we look to the future and if we think about a sustainable future, it's really quite challenging. Australia is burning, climate change. There's a lot that technology can do, but what I've heard from Indigenous people and what I feel is that we actually have to look back and we have to learn from how Indigenous people lived on the land for thousands of years in a way that was sustainable completely. And so I'm wondering if you're starting to feel that as an Indigenous leader, that people are now starting to turn to you. Are you hearing more, trying to get advice on how we can move forward?
Yeah, like everything that people are doing to make steps away from climate change is Indigenous ways of thinking, right? What's called what's it called with the farming with there's aquaponics. That's a way of farming that the Mayans have been doing since time, right? Having fish and plants grow in the same sort of ecosystem. But the actual problem that we're facing is a value system. The Indigenous people had a different way of measuring value, we know the true value of our resources, and it's not currency, right? The forcing of every Indigenous people all over the world to compare our resources to currency is the downfall of the human species. We know the true value of an apple, and it's not $1.25, right? The value of an apple is if you eat it, you live until tomorrow. And we knew that with everything. We knew how all of that worked. And our language reflected that. And that's why they had to disconnect us from it. The forcing of the value system that we need to change is we need to indigenize our measurement of wealth. Okay, wealth, as we understand it, the colonial measurement of wealth is based on how much you can hoard and accumulate. Right? The more stuff I have, the wealthier I am. The Indigenous measurement of wealth is based on how much you can afford to give away. Right? I don't need all this stuff. If I needed it all, I'd be poor. But the fact that I don't need it all, and I can give you half so we have a better life, that's what makes me wealthy. Right? So if 5 white guys in the US switched their measurement of wealth from how much they have to how much they can give away, everything would change. Right? The other measurement that we need to switch is the measurement of success. Right? The measurement of success in an Indigenous community was based on how well you took care of the most vulnerable. It had nothing to do with who had the most stuff. It had to do with who had the least, how much they had, and how well you took care of the most vulnerable in your community. Who had the most, the elders and the children were treasures. They were the most taken care of. And the people that could go do labor were the ones that were away. The elder and the child were the way that you kept the knowledge going. So the laborer in our society is the one that's worth everything, where children and elderly are seen as something to put aside. So it's going to be a huge shift in our understanding of wealth and success for any of this to work. But it shifted only 150 years ago. This is all brand new. Right? This apocalypse that we're waiting for right now, that's again for white people. Indigenous people have already lived through our apocalypse. This is our Mad Max. We've had everything taken from us. This is what it looks like. Yeah. All right, you guys.